Hi, I'm Femi OK.
And I'm Malika Bilal.
Today on the stream, we have a melting pot of guests who've all been asked this question more than once. Are you ready for the question, David Shams?
Yeah.
All right. What are you?
That's really interesting, actually. I mean, I grew up in Kentucky, but my father's Iranian and my mother's American, so get that question a lot and get a lot of raised eyebrows when
You've
I
got the
explain
answer down, pat.
Yeah.
All right, so Julie Matthews in Adelaide. Don't hit me, Julie, but what are you?
I like to keep people guessing. I find the question annoying. I wonder what business it's got of anybody to know that I'm part Japanese, part English.
Wow. And then we've got Naomi Green and also her husband Matthew. They're in Perth. What are your kids, Naomi and Matthew, when people ask? What do you say?
Well, I do answer the question, which is they're half Australian, half British, and then the other side is they're African from my side.
Okay, very nice. Maya. Maya has got such an amazing history. Maya McManus is in Mumbai, India. What flavours are you, Maya?
I always answer in the short form, so I always say I'm half English and half Bengali, but that's not entirely true. So I have some Spanish gypsy blood somewhere, Irish, German, all kinds of things.
We've seen your family history. That could go on for most of the programme, so I'll leave it there. Malika.
Well, you all have heard what our guest said. Here's how some people in our community responded to that same question.
So when people ask me what am I, it can feel extremely alienating.
I mean, I know a lot of mixed people get offended. They're like, I mean, what are you? Like, what does that mean? I'm a person.
It really is a microaggression.
I actually kind of get happy when people ask me.
It's an othering that I've been familiar with all my life. You're not really one of us. So what are you?
I much prefer it if people ask, what's your family background?
Usually I just say human, biracial, and annoyed by your question.
I'm half Afghan and half white.
I identify as Hapa, which is kind of a blanket term for mixed race people.
My mom's from Ecuador and my father is from Iran.
I am half Indian, half English. I describe myself as mixed race.
These days I'm really trying to embrace a not half, but both mentality.
So yes, this question of labels, people are obviously curious when they can't work your label out. Why do you think they care so much, David?
I think they're just curious, in my opinion at least. I know some people want to put people in certain boxes and maybe prejudge them based on what those boxes are, but at least in my experience in Kentucky, it's more curiosity. It's like, oh, you're different. Where are you from? What background are you? And growing up, honestly, I didn't have it as much as I have had it more recently since coming to a more multicultural city.
Sure.
Which is interesting.
Sure. And Julie, we're just looking here. This is the 2011 UK census, and it breaks down people via different ethnic groups. So we've got white and then 4 different categories for white. And there's actually here mixed and multiple ethnic groups. So there's lots of different options here. When people ask you, or when they asked you when you were a little girl, how did you respond to people? Did you even know what they were talking about?
Yeah, I was well aware that I was meant to be white, otherwise they wouldn't be asking me, so I was well aware that I looked different. I would tell them I was born on a boat. I would say I was born on a boat halfway between Japan and Australia, and leave it at that. Because I didn't feel I could say that I was English because of the racism that I encountered in the UK, and I didn't feel I could say I was Japanese because I'd never lived in Japan. So I floated around in the sea.
Wow.
Maya, I want to share an experience that someone shared with us on Twitter. This is Corrales, who says, when I get that question, I respond with, take a guess. Let them name off several incorrect Asian countries, and then finally I tell them I'm 100% Irish, but this person goes on to say, I live in the States, I'm Irish, provides the appropriate level of ridiculousness equal to what they are asking of a half Asian, which this person is. So Maya, are there ways of dealing with this question with humor? Have you found your coping mechanism when you get that question?
Initially it used to annoy me. Now I'm quite used to it actually, so it doesn't even bother me. I I just stick to half English, half Indian. Or in India, especially because obviously I look different. I just say, yeah, I'm from here. I speak the language. I just look a little whiter than normal. It's fine.
See, Maya, when I moved to the southern part of the United States, people kept on asking me to speak a little bit more, like, say something. You sound like Mary Poppins, or Black Mary Poppins. I want you to just keep talking to us, Maya, because what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing doesn't go together.
Yeah, I get that a lot. Everyone says, oh, you speak Hindi. Say something. I'm like, I'm not a monkey in a zoo. But,
all right, I won't ask you to speak Hindi then. Moving on, have a look at this picture here. Look at this lovely family. We've got Naomi and Matthew, baby Savannah, and then we also have Ebony and who did I leave out?
Kobe.
All right, Kobe. How could I forget Kobe? New dad to new baby, and then Naomi. What's your strategy? You've got children who've got two different heritages and mixed heritages. What's your strategy for bringing them up?
Obviously, we let them make them aware of the fact that they are mixed, noting that they're both very young. Each night before they go to bed, they're read a different story, something that they can relate to.
About culture and mixed race, and we've got all the books there for them.
Yeah.
So we read and we describe their shade. We don't say colour, we're trying to say shade. Everyone's got different shades of skin because they're at that stage where they're asking all the time, what colour is mummy, what colour is daddy, and they're trying to identify.
Are they asking that already?
Books. They are. He's 4, so he's going to be going to kindy. So a lot of the kids where we are mostly Caucasian. So for him, it's kind of, he does know he looks a bit different, so the questions are there already. So we've done it from very young. Even Ebony, she's only 2.5, and she's aware that she's half black and half white, and we talk about it to them all the time.
I'm really surprised. David?
Yeah, they're getting young.
Yeah, I think identify with that a little bit as well. Like growing up in rural Kentucky, there were 2 races. It was pretty much whites, African Americans, and then my dad. And so I didn't really know, and he's a little darker for Iranians even. And so it just was like interesting growing up seeing that and trying to figure out like, okay, well, what's my dad, and then what am I, and how do I fit into everything? And luckily growing up, I didn't really have many issues in my hometown. Most of the people accepted us, and even now when I'm exploring my Iranian identity, most of my friends at home.
Is it because they didn't know that you were Iranian?
No, they knew. My dad had been there since '73, so he'd been well integrated into the community. But it was more, I think they just didn't. They just accepted the fact that he's just like us. He's just another person. And then
which
now,
you are?
Yeah, which I am.
Yeah.
Which was great. So I didn't have to have that identity complex.
Can I ask if you guys feel that we all have a bit of an obsession with identity? We're all kind of a bit preoccupied with pinning down precisely an ethnicity or a culture or a race, and that's kind of gets in the way of getting to know people.
I don't think it gets in the way to know people. I think people are just curious and they just want to find out what your background is. I think some people it's a way to start a conversation. I mean, it does get annoying, but for some people it is just a way of starting a conversation to find out where you're from, and then it takes on from there. So I think we've all got an obsession with something, but I also have it myself, even though I find it annoying. I do ask, I just find, we might have a connection, there might be a background
so
that
Naomi,
we have to share together.
How do you ask somebody else? Because I'm curious about how you would ask them.
Probably the same way everyone asks.
No way, okay. No way. All right.
It's different when I'm asking. I don't know.
Oh, it's okay. I can ask because I'm Ghanaian. Okay, I'm British. Yeah. Okay.
So one problem I want to ask Maya this, but one problem is that usually people don't ask who you are. They ask where you're from, and that's kind of a different question. It's a slightly different question because the subtext of that is that they're suggesting you're not from where they see you are. Because if they thought you were from where they saw you were, they wouldn't ask the question in the first place. They would just know. So I'm wondering if Maya gets that question frequently.
If I got that question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where you're from, not who you are, but where are you from?
I've been asked where I'm from my whole life because in India I look different, in England I sound different. So, but I mean, I've never faced it in a negative way. I mean, I've always experienced it in a positive. You know, I have never faced any racism, if that's what you're asking.
Well, Julie, picking up on that question that you asked Maya, there are people online talking about stages of life, and so even at one stage of their life, they may have felt a certain way and gotten certain questions. At another stage, it's slightly different. So I want to share the experience of one person. This is Fight Loudly, that's their Twitter handle, who says, "It's definitely changed for me over time. My childhood was race blind, while clearly being shamed and internally rejecting my Chinese Indonesianness," but then goes on to say, "That totally changed the dynamic with my mom. She never had the resources or the space to discuss race, but now I'm aware of it and we can." So Julie, I'm wondering, in your own experience, have you felt this in your own life or with your children's lives? Has it changed?
I think it's gone in the reverse. I get the kind of feeling as you get older, you get less raced, or possibly people become less interested in your race. And that while you're younger, it's obviously because of your own identity-seeking issues, a bigger issue or a bigger problem. You know, people are trying to figure out who they are. And often if they can't pin themselves down in a set of pre-existing terms, you know, I'm white, I'm Anglo, I'm black, I'm Ghanaian, I'm this or that, then they struggle a little bit more to find the right terms with which to identify and pin themselves down. So
what about
I think when you get older, you're less worried about that kind of stuff.
So, Julie, what about when you start to bring up a family, and then so people would be curious about your heritage, and then you have kids, and here are your kids here. For instance, I know that your mother taught your son Japanese. Why couldn't you teach him Japanese?
And my daughter too. I'm older than a lot of the people on the show, and my mother came from Japan in the 50s. During the time when there wasn't a great deal of sympathy for Japan post World War II, and so I was brought up to be white, to be Anglo, to be integrated. So I wasn't taught Japanese. My mum wanted me to be English.
Naomi and Matthew, when you hear Julie talk about the generational differences in bringing up a mixed-race child, I want you to have a listen to two people who sent a video comment to the stream. These are two fathers who have slightly different experiences, but you might be able to find the commonality. So here is Dewan Gibson and Alex Bennett. Have a listen.
My wife, who's white, and I are the parents of 3 biracial kids, including this little guy right here who's still co-sleeping. Race has always been somewhat of a factor for our family. I remember when my wife was pregnant with our first son, she was crying and asked her why, and it turns out she was worried that people would think that she's his babysitter and not his mother. And when I'm out with him alone, people, they don't think that I'm their babysitter, but they do often wonder who I am. It's as if I'm just some random black guy hanging out with toddlers.
I am the white husband of a black woman and father of a 4-year-old biracial son. And one of the biggest issues we deal with is whether our son really even understands race at this point. And I in particular worry or think about whether I as a white guy will be able to help him later in life when he's grappling with issues of race that come up in circumstances I've never had to deal with. Ironically, I think the flip side of that is that people assume I don't have anything to add to the conversation or the dialogue, and I think I do. I certainly want to participate and help.
So Matthew, you were nodding all throughout that. Are these conversations that you and Naomi are having with each other?
Oh, completely. We identify with everything that they've just said. So yeah,
I got asked every time I had one of my children, because they were very fair with straight black hair. I was always asked, "Oh, whose baby is that? You know, are you the nanny?" And I was, well, no, this is my child. So, you know, they would be taken aback by the comment. They'd be like, "Oh, really? That's your baby? How comes it's so white?" is the father white, or, and then I'd kind of have to try and explain it, but not always to explain. Sometimes I would just carry on walking because it's just ignorant comment. But it's really hard sometimes having to explain to people.
Yeah, it's a little frustrating that it's kind of the first thing that comes up every single time you speak to somebody. It's, oh my God, beautiful, beautiful children.
Whose are they?
What's the mix? What's their mother? And that's right from the outset.
Are you the nanny? Yeah. So we've had that comment quite a bit.
Yeah. And there's something else that happens also when you've got children with mixed heritage, and that is people pet them quite a lot. They like to stroke them and touch them and pet them.
And again, it's just
your kids
curiosity
ever
because
petted?
the hair's different.
Yeah.
But we actually put it on their childcare form. Please do not touch the hair. I'm not even kidding. Please do not touch the hair. It got to the point where Kobe, I think he got really paranoid about people touching his hair all the time. So we actually did shave it off. I loved his little fro, but it got to the point where they always used to touch it because it was such a different texture. So we just shaved it off because he was just getting a bit of a complex by it, which is sad, and I miss it. But
just strangers coming up at the shopping centre. He'll be in a shopping cart and just patting him on the head. It's just
like it was a little pet.
Yeah.
Just a little animal just walking like.
Oh,
we don't know you, but we're going to pet your child.
Kobe.
So. And like the other guy said about being white, like he wouldn't feel like he would identify because he's never been through, the same experiences as a person that's colour or, a person who's mixed.
That's what I was interested with Julie. I mean, as a white Australian, I've never really thought about race. I've identified as being white, but it's not really a topic of conversation. So you're half Japanese and half Caucasian, but you married an Australian, I'm assuming, noting your kids are 1/4 Japanese and 3/4 Caucasian. How does he allow the Japanese side to be integrated into your children?
I don't necessarily know it's an allow. It's simply an is. When you get involved with someone who is not of the same cultural background as yourself, it simply is there as them and part of them. Because my mother was a war bride, she was in quite a dependent situation on us, the children of the family, because she had no family in the UK. We originally went to the UK. Yeah. And that meant that we knew from when we were very young that we were responsible for my mother. And when I eventually came to Australia 25, 26, 27 years ago, it was really to bring Mum closer to her family. We travelled back, obviously, but it put her closer to Japan and to her sisters. It is always tricky when you're in a situation. Naomi, you'd probably understand this, where your family are on the other side of the world and you're constantly figuring out ways to connect your kids to family. And
that side of it, that culture, that history, because they missed out on all of that. So when we go over to the UK, it's a different environment for them, and it sounds really funny, but because they had never been around that many black people in their lives, so we went to the UK, I think they were actually taken back by it. I think they were actually really nervous around my family. Even though they'd seen them on the computer, they hadn't actually seen many black people apart from their mum and the odd few. So for them, I think it was quite daunting. And, my actually family quite laughed. Your children are racist. It's funny. Because
I actually had a really similar experience whenever I was first able to hang out or spend time with my Iranian family in California. I'd spent all my life in Kentucky, and now all of a sudden I'm getting a chance to spend time with my Iranian side. And first there's a different tradition of what you do when you wake up in the morning, how you eat, different things along those lines. And so it completely threw me off. Not to mention we don't speak Farsi at all. I was born right after the revolution, and so my dad basically was like, I'm not going to teach you Farsi. And so it just was always this really, as much as I wanted to be a part of it, this kind of tension or stress whenever I was a part of it. So it kind of I was there, but not. So.
One interesting thing I've noticed, and I'd be interested in other people's experience of this, is if you're mixed race, you grow up with very few role models because very few people identify as mixed race. What seems to have happened recently is that more and more people are saying, yeah, I'm part this, I'm part that, my mum's this and my mum's that. But the thing is, there are images of black guys and white guys and Asian guys, and it's only very recently we've been seeing these images of sort of Eurasians and Anglo-blackness, I guess. And it often seems to me those images are commodified. You know, they sell films, they sell anything really. And I'm just wondering if you've had similar experiences or worried about your kids having similar experiences, that no role models of themselves as mixed people.
See,
and those that
Julie,
are
take a
just
breath.
like
Julie, take a breath because we're running out of time. But I want to show you something that Naomi does because we haven't mentioned her books before. And by way of answering that, Naomi's worked on a couple of books. One's The Colourful Life, same but different. And then here's another one, which is beautiful, Surprise Baby. So you're really kind of proactive in this idea about giving your kids and other kids who have mixed heritage something to look at that looks like them.
I am, yeah. We didn't have it. Well, in the UK, I think there was more books. In America, there's a lot more. But over here in Australia, there's hardly any books that, you know, my children or other multicultural families can actually identify with. And I've spoken about this a few times because I used to work in childcare, to see if we could actually get these kind of books or these resources. And it's never happened. So for me, I was so practical about it. I just decided, well, if it's not going to happen, I'm going to do it myself. I want my kids to have a book they can look at and say, this looks like my family. You know, even if the dad was black and the mum was white, they could still look at the dad and say, he's got the same skin color as my mum, or he's got the same hair. So he's identifying with someone in that book. And that's all it needs to be. It shouldn't be about color. It should just be a book with, you know, a multicultural family, a different idea of family is what we're lacking here. And that's it. It's not about color, nothing else. It's just a children's book, which everybody, every family should be able to have and not look at it and say, this is a book for, you know, people of color or, you know, people of a different race. It's not about that.
You know, Julie,
and that's what kids need to know.
Julie, you had asked a question earlier, and so we also got a response on Twitter. This is Terry Coleman, who says, regarding what you talked about in the commodification of mix, it seems related to the quote mark, mixed kids are so beautiful. It's an exotification of that mix. But I want to pivot just a little bit here. And Maya, give you this Facebook comment we got from Sho, who says, I'm half Israeli, half Japanese, and being biracial is a blessing, but it can sometimes be exhausting. It's a lot of work exercising all the parts of your identity. Do you ever feel that torn between the parts of you?
Yeah, I feel torn, but the most exhausting part is actually having to explain where you're from. I just want to go back to the point that Julie was making about role models, about not having a role model growing up who you can identify with. I never even thought about race till I was in my teenager, until I was a teenager. It never was a factor in my life, even though I was growing up in India, and I clearly looked different. So the point about having a role model and having to identify in terms of, you know, what they look like, it just never occurred to me. Never, ever. I mean, I was not even aware of it. So
Maya, I love looking at pictures of your family. Here are you with, I think they're cousins. It's hard to work out because you've got such an amazing melting pot of family here. But look at all of these amazing different heritages all blended up together. And I could just go through your family forever. And like family reunions must be the most fun. And if anyone is trying to work out what is going on with this family, it's just decades and decades of amazing history all coming together. Let me end on this beautiful woman here. Who's this woman?
That's my grandma. That's my mother's
your grandma. All right. Very good. Malika, how have people been reacting to this conversation?
With their own stories. So Karina says, I'm Guatemalan and Native, Hopi, Navajo, and Yaqui, and think it's important to know our roots. We wouldn't exist without our ancestors.
All right. Thank you for sharing your roots. David, Julie, Naomi, Matthew, and Maya. We're taking you to our online post show so we can talk about it a little bit more at stream.aljazeera.com. Hopefully, you can join us there too. Take care, everybody. Welcome back. We're in the Streams Post Show. We're discussing experiences of being from mixed heritage. So let's get right back to it. There's so many things to talk about. We're basically talking about all of our lives all mixed up together. I am fascinated by language. So, David, you don't speak Farsi? Or do you now?
I don't. It's not very good.
All
I can
right.
do basic things, but I'm not dangerous, for lack of a better term.
I love that. Do Iranians give you a hard time?
Some do, some don't. I was working an event for Iranian Americans, and there was an older gentleman who came in and was speaking Farsi to me, and I apologized I couldn't speak Farsi. And his response was, it was in Farsi, but I picked up enough, and it was like, how can you have someone working at an Iranian American event that doesn't speak Farsi?
Oh,
and
boom!
It was, so that was a bit difficult to take, but at the same time, it was also isolated. So most people have been pretty understanding for the most part.
Seema, you speak Hindi and Bengali, right? And your sister doesn't?
No, she understands a little bit, but she's a lot younger. She's 5.5 years younger.
Right.
So we moved away from India when she was really very young.
Right.
So, yeah. And at home we speak English.
All right. Do you think that's language is a way that you connect really well to all the different areas of your sort of roots and backgrounds, etc.?
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge advantage, especially when you're living in a country where you're sort of perceived as a foreigner.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you start speaking the language, it's like, oh, okay, you're one of us.
Right.
You know, it's a huge advantage.
So
my sister actually, sorry?
Yeah, there will be times when people will talk about you because they think that you're an English lady and you've got no idea what they're talking about. What's the worst thing you've ever overheard about yourself?
Mostly complimentary things.
Really? Oh, that's even better. Wow, I like that. I'm thinking the worst. All right, Naomi, I'm going to give you a hard time here. Where in the UK did you grow up?
London.
London, okay, me too. And my family's from Nigeria. Your family is from?
Ghana.
All right, what part of Ghana?
Yes. So they're in Accra, so just West Africa, so just like, So I've been many times. I can't speak the language. My dad never taught me because there's two different tribal languages and they just decided not to do it. They thought it's too hard.
Right.
So I do feel sad that my kids can't speak, Ghanaian at all. I think it's lost. But that's not my fault, that's my parents' fault. But I would have loved for them to have learned it. And really, to be honest with you, I was going to say to the rest of them, if those who can't speak, would they have liked to have learnt it? Like they could have gone somewhere to a school, an education program to actually try and pick up the language. So I actually considered doing that and then maybe passing it down to my kids. But
do it, Naomi. Let's do it together.
I know,
seriously.
I should.
No, seriously, we'll do it.
Seriously, I think it's sad that it's lost.
I know, it's bad. David?
Yeah, definitely. I would have loved to learn the language. I mean, at the end of the day, first off, it's good to have. I can communicate with my family members in Iran or communicate with my dad. And then for like little things, like if we're wanting to have a conversation that people don't or shouldn't hear, we could have that conversation.
You don't have a secret language, do you? Like a code. That more than anything else. Malika?
There is one experience that I wanted to share with you, David. This is from Miranda, who says, I'm Saudi and Puerto Rican. Try explaining that identity when most people have huge misconceptions and know little about those two countries. So I know growing up for you might have been difficult to explain the Iranian part of your heritage when you're in a place where there's not a lot of Iranians. And in particular, I found this blog post of yours that I thought was really interesting. And the title is, I thought my dad was black. So because there's not many other Iranians there and you're trying to put yourself into a category, this is the category you chose.
Yeah.
What happened?
The result of it was my dad said no and kept driving. And we didn't really have a conversation about it and explore that any further. And I think my brother, who's 4 years older than me, chided me for even asking the question. But maybe later on my mom explained to me the difference. But it was just kind of like a curiosity and kind of like an innocent kid like asking like, oh, what's this? yeah, so it was.
Why do you think you thought your dad was black?
Well, I think primarily because there were, as I said before, there were whites, African Americans, and then my dad, and I knew my dad wasn't white, so he had to be black. And it's a 4-year-old kid making that deduction, I guess, and then just asking a question. I was pretty precocious as a kid anyway, so. But I usually get more questions on how does an Iranian end up in Kentucky than I do anything else. And then how does an Iranian meet someone from Kentucky and get married? And how did that affect anything more than the curiosity of being half Iranian?
Sure.
So, yeah.
Matthew, let me drag you back into this conversation because I think you have an amazing perspective to bring to what we've been talking about so far. And that is, there's often an assumption that people gravitate towards the side that is maybe not the most well-known side of their mixed heritage. And there's, they're white and something else, and the something else is what everybody's fascinated by. So the part of your kid's heritage that's white, what's your plan for that? Because they're not really half and half, they're just whole amazing kids. How are you going to help them?
This is all very new to me.
Yeah, how are you going to... Because have you ever experienced racism, Matthew?
No, I haven't received any racism. I mean, the thing that a lot of people don't understand until they actually travel from Australia or to Australia is as multicultural as we proclaim to be, we aren't really. There's a great mix of Asian, various countries, and Australian, but outside of that, there's not as big a mix as there is, say, through Europe or in the United States. And the big eye opener for me going back to the UK or going across to the States is it's every second person identifies as being African over in the UK and over in the US, but it's not like that over here. So you're right, there is a bit of a novelty associated with our children in that they are quite a bit darker than just about every other child that's out there. So that's why it's a little more prevalent for us, I think, with people coming up and asking the question, what's their mix? I mean, they know that half white. They look at me and they see the relationship that I have with my kids and know that I'm the father.
But I think as soon as you say that you've got black in you, then you're automatically then classed as black and not mixed, which I hate. But I'm very proud to be black. But if you say mixed race kids and then you say, so he's half black and half white, they always consider that child is black. It's never.
Yeah. So back to the question initially. How do I?
So your kids come back and like, Dad, they're like, somebody was really mean to me at school and they called me a black so and so and so and so. What are you going to do?
Well, we start the education early, internal within the house, identifying that skin colour is only aesthetics. It's everybody is the same inside, and that's through Naomi's books and through the other books and the other education that we give them. We try to obviously the schools that they're going to go to. Then we're going to make sure we have the conversation with the teachers prior to make sure that those books and that sort of learning is provided at that school environment
like a show
as well.
And tell. I'd like to go into the school and address the kids and sit with them and
be a little bit more proactive. But getting to the negative side and my kids being subjected to racism, I'm aware that it may happen.
What would you say?
That's the difficult thing. What do you say? And I guess I'll have to wait until it actually happens. I mean, having never experienced before.
See, of course, it's happened with Kobe. So for me, I just tell him that it's. Some people can be mean and it's hard to deal with. And I said, don't get upset by it. If something happens, then come and tell mummy. And you just tell that child that you don't like what they're saying to you and you just walk on, you move on, you don't address it, you just carry on. Because he used to get upset by it all the time when someone would say something to him, and now he's stronger.
I want to come over to your school and just thump them. That is not the way to deal with it. But I was like, who can be mean to this gorgeous little kid? Just like,
but they do.
Malika and I were coming over to sort them out. Then there'd be 3 black ladies at the school.
But, where do they get it from? That's the question. Yeah. Why do kids say mean things? It's not, they're innocent. So these questions are just something they're throwing out. It has to start at home. So the parents need to address these before the kids, they understand about race and color. So if you do it from a very young age, or you go into the schools, these kids won't be saying these kind of things to Kobe. So it starts at home. You've got to address these issues as a family at home.
So
and that's
Naomi,
what we're trying to get.
You and Matthew busted a thought that I had. I always thought that little kids had no idea what colour they were. And I thought they totally had no sense of it. But you've totally changed my thought on that.
They do. They change. It goes to maybe when they're about 3 or 4.
Wow. Could be the fact that we educate from the start. So we've been a little proactive, and maybe that's accelerated the.
No, I don't think so. But even in we go to a play group, so things like that. They have lots of white dolls and they're Caucasian dolls. And the other day we were talking, and like Ebony was saying, "I have a black doll at home. Where's the black doll here?" So, you know,
Ebony sounds like her mummy.
So they looked up and go, that's a good point. She goes, I would have never thought to put a black doll in here.
Nice.
And she goes, I am so sorry, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
But, it depends on the child. It really does depend on the child. But colour is part of it. It's just part of learning. So, they will pick up on it, especially seeing, mum and dad are different colours. And it's not a negative thing. It's just being curious of, of people. And we call it shades. Everyone's a different shade. Even if you're white, you're still a different shade of white. Yeah.
Exactly.
So we're talking about kids and where they learn some of these things. This is an experience of Delu on Twitter, who says, my niece is mixed and she suffers rejection from both sides. She's too light for the blacks and too dark for the whites, and it saddens me. But Julie, I actually want to pivot just a little bit and go to something you said a little bit earlier that someone in our community picked up on. And you mentioned if you're mixed race, you grow up with very few role models. And so I on Pakistan says a lot of people have Bill Gates as a role model, but they aren't white. Where and why does race come into this? And I know we talked about Naomi's books. What is the importance of having those books and the importance of having role models to this person's question?
I guess if you're constantly being asked who you are, where you come from, you start to look around and regard yourself as different. I guess if you experience as a child racism, kids are calling you names in school and elsewhere, you understand yourself as different. So, yeah, I forgot what the question was.
Why are role models so important? This person says you can have a role model that's white. Why is that a big deal?
So that's the reason. It's why Naomi's books are so, I think, important. It's because it just gives you a place to look and know that you are not weird or odd. I think kids really don't like to be targeted as different. We're all desperately trying to be the same at that age. We're seeking identity, and if we're being told by racialized discourses and people's around us and things we see that we're very different, it's tough. Right. So if you see models of yourself doing cool things, being okay, you become okay.
All right, so quick fire round, because I've got to wrap this up quite soon. Maya, what's your favourite food? Your favourite food? Oh my God, I'm just seeing which part of your heritage you gravitate towards. I don't know if you're going to say fish and chips or dal. We'll see. What are you going to say?
No, rice and dal.
Oh, okay. Good choice. Matthew, what's your favourite food?
Well, I used to eat quite healthy before I met Naomi, but now I eat anything and everything. So
Naomi, your husband just threw you under the bus there.
Yeah, but I'm African and we eat healthy, hearty meals, I have to say, and I don't put it on, so that's not my fault. He doesn't have to eat them.
All right. So does your food kind of focus on your heritage? Do you have stuff? Do you throw stuff on the Barbie, Matthew?
Yeah, you do.
Well, yeah.
Duh.
Australian.
Okay.
The Australian diet differs from anywhere else in the world. We go to the UK and I eat exactly the same over in the UK as I do here in Australia.
Yeah.
Naomi will make a couple of African dishes that's in our repertoire, for lack of better words. So,
like what? What's in her repertoire? Tell us something Ghanaian that you eat.
There's a corned beef dish that she does with rice. It's
a stew.
Like a stew.
Right.
The tin corned beef.
Yeah.
All right.
It's nice.
It's nice. All right. Very good. Great. Julie, very quickly, where do you gravitate as well as food is concerned? What's your favourite dish? Food?
I'm Asian, Indian is, I guess, what I would eat. And here in Australia, an amazing fusion of Asian, India, well, mainly Asian actually, and that's the kind of stuff I like, stir fries, tofu, kind of stuff. Yeah.
David?
Yeah, so my mom makes really good roast beef, so that's usually one of my favorite foods, and then kebab from Moby's around the corner here.
Right.
So
I was expecting this amazing mixed heritage fusion, but no! It's the place from around the corner. All right, everybody, thank you so much. It's been really a pleasure having you. David, Julie, Naomi, Matthew, Maya, Malika.
Wakas will have the last word on Twitter. Mixed race people are growing. It's good. I believe it could eventually lead to the end of racism. Still centuries away, though.
All right, I like that. It's a nice optimistic note to end on. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out to be on the stream. Really appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.